Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this beautiful summer Sunday night with Coach Menachem and Uchi Parnas, and being part of our Sichas Chaverim over here. And tonight's a special shir. It's a very powerful shir. I know it's going to be amazing. So you could admit over here, Milan. Night shir is 156. Again, I always start off first the platform, like just really saying that it's growing, it's exploding. It's a worldwide program. We get feedback from all over the place. There's people that watch it on all parts of the continent, from Mexico to Eretz Yisrael to Europe and places that I've never even heard of. And Baruch Hashem, it's really being a tremendous chizuk for Klal Yisrael, for us. And I want to thank all of our viewers for posting on their WhatsApp statuses and telling people about it, emailing it around, telling friends and family. We have an amazing, amazing lineup. Stam is already packed up. I'm going to get to that shortly. And again, we had a tremendous share last week with Rav Yitzchak Schwartz, and then Manas Rima was still talking about it. It was such a powerful share. So we're here again to Sichas Chaverim to talk about a very deep topic that's very enmeshed in a lot of things. I'm going to try to get a lot of clarity. So please join us tonight and be part of it. And if you're listening to this later, just listen to the entire share because it's going to be a very deep one. If anybody's interested in joining our WhatsApp statuses, or getting the flyers every Sunday, just WhatsApp me at 848-525-0066. Save my number. I'll send you an email every Sunday with the flyer, the speaker. You can post it around, put on your status. And if you want to sign up to get the email list from Coach Menachem that has all the speakers, the upcoming speakers, the replays, all the detailed information, go to his website, www.menachemberenfeld.com. For all the people that are watching this replay later on YouTube, you can click on the subscribe button. So when Menachem uploads the videos, you get notified. You see all the videos that go up there. The cost of that is $0. So please subscribe to Coach Menachem, and you can click on the like button, smash the like button, so more people get views. And again, I want to start first with thanking our advertising sponsors, the Lakewood Scoop here in Lakewood, Ellie and Ariel from the 5 Town Central, Chayla Kaufman from JCN, from always promoting us on all the digital Jewish platforms. Again, if anybody's here the first time, I don't know where have you been, but the bottom line is welcome. Every Sunday night at 9:30 on this Zoom ID, we have different, very important, critical topics that we deal with, help spread the word. And we have Rabbanim, therapists. We bring on the best of the best. And Menachem, next week, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the schedule because it's a big schedule coming up with Yom Tovim. Next week will be the final shir before Rosh Hashanah. September 10th, we're going to have an amazing shir with world-famous Rabbi Ben-Zion Twersky from Milwaukee, the Hunsteipler Rebbe, at 9:30. The topic is, will this year's Rosh Hashanah hold a deeper meaning than dipping the apple in the honey? Embracing renewal, exploring the significance of the sacred month. We're going to be talking about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the high holy days, and really getting a deeper understanding, a deeper feeling of what it is. And Rabbi Ben-Zion Twersky is a world-renowned speaker. He's been on a few times, and I really try to bring him in before the high holy days to really get everybody the chizuk that we need before we go into these strong Yom Tovim. It's going to be a deep and powerful, meaningful program. If you know anybody that could need chizuk for the Yom Tovim, I don't know anybody who doesn't. We'll let people know about it. And please join us, tell your friends, your family to join as well. Tonight we have the schus and the honor of having, I'm going to say it, Mattis is not going to like to hear it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I consider him basically the best therapist in the Lakewood community, but I find him to be the world famous Mattis Miller. And the reason why I like him so much, Haraya, he's here on tonight for the 4th time. So if I feel like I can come on 4 times, I must be a hold of him. So Mattis, I think you're an amazing therapist, and I like to really, with Mattis specifically, we have this relationship that we like to tackle very specific technical diagnosis or thing. I don't use the word diagnosis, typical, very important critical issues that are very therapeutic based, and we like to get a very clarity of what it is, and we like to understand it, and we like to really grow from it, and to get chizuk from it. We're not here to bash it. We're here to understand it and how to grow from it. We did this on many other topics. We did it on borderline. We did it on other topics. So now that we're here tonight, we're really going to cover the whole topic of parental enmeshment, growing, and really having healthy relationships with our parents with us. And this is a huge topic. We've covered it in different angles over the period of time. But tonight is we're really trying to really zoom in and really get a clarity. So again, tonight's share is share 156, and we always start off with a gematria. Sitting here live in the studio is the president, CEO, founder, the one who created the program, just to clarify, Harav Ernoich Fried, who's a close chavra of mine, and a tremendous Yedid who's been there with me the last month, and we went through a lot together. So he's going to give the gematria and see how it's tied into this whole share.
Thank you so much, Ushi, for the wonderful introduction. Shir number 156, From Boundaries to Balance, Unpacking Unhealthy Parental Enmeshment. It is absolutely necessary in order to create this balance to have the proper wisdom and intelligence, and perhaps some creativity along with an out-of-the-box thought process. This week's Gematria B'Siyat Dishmaya of 156 is HaChochma V'Habina, which means wisdom and intelligence. Be'ezus Hashem Yisborach. I hope we all can gain some insight on this topic and definitely gain some wisdom and intelligence how to go about this.
Oh my, shkoyach, beautiful. And Mattis, no, we need Chachma and Bina. We need it, Chachma.
Absolutely, we're going to need a lot of it.
We're going to need a lot of it. So he's saying that you have it. So that's why we're bringing you on. So we're first going to start off with Coach Menachem. Coach Menachem, we're here another Sunday night. We're spending hours with you. We want to know why we're here. What is this topic? What are we trying to accomplish? Lay out the foundation before we get into it.
Yes, Baruch Hashem, it's another Sunday night, and we do spend many hours on this, and with a lot of Siyata Deshmaya. Tonight is number 156, and I do want to welcome everyone to another Sunday night. And yes, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we're learning and growing. And here we are with Mattis. We have this host to have you on again, Mitzvah Hashem, to continue. It's really continue our conversation, which we have every Sunday nights. It says by Bilam, when he saw the Klal Yisrael, when he saw the tents, he said, "Matoivi oilech v'Yaakov." Rashi says that he saw that the opening of each tent was away from the other. They weren't facing each other. So when you live in a neighborhood, you can go outside and talk and have a good time. But at the end of the day, you go inside your house, and that's your territory. That's where you belong. And the other neighbor goes into theirs. The question is, in the tent itself, when you have parents with the kids, they say each child should have their drawer with their things inside. So they should feel, this is my space. Between parents and kids, or the kids, siblings, to understand who am I, what's my role, what do I have to do, and how to connect, how to be there for each other, and then to move back and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing. It doesn't mean that we have to do the same thing. Just the concept that we're going to be discussing tonight in Mitzvah Hashem, it does get a little bit sticky. The past few weeks over here on Sunday night, we've had discussion. 2 weeks ago, we discussed with Manis Friedman about the mitzvah of Kibbud Av, and the way he brought it out is interesting for those who understood it. In a way, no matter what, they're the ones who brought you in this world. So we do have to show them a little bit of respect, understanding how much is important. And then last week we had an important conversation with Rabbi Schwartz about V'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha, how much that's the Klal Gadol B'Torah, how important it is to be there for others, and how to be there for others. And over there also, sometimes the conversation is not always easy to understand. Last week is a little bit easier. But I think this week in Mitzvah Hashem, we have the schus, we have a privilege to actually sit into the therapist's room and to ask the therapists all our questions. What would you tell people with, to understand whether it's a relationship with our parents, how much to do, and what we have to, what we don't have to, and when it's with siblings or neighbors, friends. How could we love others and before loving ourselves, and all of these questions that come up. So Baruch Hashem, we have the schus to be here with Mattis Miller and Mitzvah Hashem. Now is the time to get your questions answered. Hopefully we're able to cover a lot, and with the information, we'll be able to apply it to, I think everybody could apply it in their lives to understand where they are, what's needed. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we should be able to grow. And a lot of Siyata D'Shmaya tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Menachem, a beautiful opening. Okay, before we get into it, there's just a few announcements over here. As everybody knows, Mattis Miller released the book, The Uncontrollable Child. We actually had a whole session on that as well. It's now translated into 4 foreign languages. He also produced an online automated master parenting class, which is helpful for all parents. You could have a lifetime access for over 12 hours of content filled with skills and strategies to improve yourself and your parenting. This course is for any parent at any stage that wants to better their parenting skills, learn the skills to help you in the process. The price of the course is usually $897. I know quite a few people that took the course and they were very happy with the course. For the next, I don't know why it says 24 hours, but I said for the next week or 2 weeks, Mattis is going to give a huge discount for everybody that's listening to Coach Menachem. And Chaparine is giving 67% off for the Coach Menachem listeners. Anybody's listening to this now live or going to listen to it later on the replay, make sure to go to his website. We'll send out all the information. And you must put in the coupon code COACHM, COAHCHM, and make sure, and you'll see the discount before you purchase it. So for our listeners, it's only going to be $297, which is $500 off the regular price of $897. It's masterparentingclass.theuncontrollablechild.com. And I'm going to put in the link soon in the chat, all the classes and everything. But anybody who's parenting kids, I definitely advise you to sign up. I don't know if you have a parenting class, you haven't listened to any of them, but Mattis is the king of the king in this, and that's my personal opinion. And I advise you to sign up for it, and there's a lot you can learn from that. We're going to get into tonight's program right now. We call tonight's program From Boundaries to Balance, Unpacking Unhealthy Parental Enmeshment. We're going to go deep tonight into issues that we need to realize and some change of ways of dealing with our children and teens and adults, for us to be healthy people and for our children to grow up self-dependent and healthy individuals. And it's a two-way street. There's the parents' part, and there's the children's part. We're going to try to cover all parts. There's the younger child part, there's the adult part. So we're really going to try to get into it. I'm going to read Mattis' bio nice and slow, and then we're going to open up the floor to him. And again, tonight is meant to be very interactive. Please join. Mattis Miller has a lot of letters after his name. I'm going to say all the letters, and you can figure out what they mean. LCSW/A.BCT/DBT/LBC/Coach Menachem Specialist. Mattis Miller is the founder and director of the Center for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy of New Jersey and the author of the groundbreaking book, The Uncontrollable Child. He's a licensed clinical social worker with over 18 years of experience. His impressive education and training background includes certification in CBT from the Academy of the Cognitive Therapy of the Beck Institute for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, certification in DBT from the DBT Linhart Board of Certification in DBT therapy, right? Dialectical behavioral therapy, and certified in schema therapy from International Society of Schema Therapy. Mattis specializes in severe emotional and personality disorders, anxiety in teens and adults, and parenting training. He's a seasoned lecturer on CBT and DBT related topics, addressing parents, clients, professionals, and is presently focused primarily on supervision, education, and consultations. Most recently, Mattis co-founded In Reach Behavioral Health, an intensive outpatient/partial hospital program opening this winter that will provide cultural sensitive intensive mental health treatment for the greater Lakewood community and beyond. So this is a big thing that Mattis is working on. I think it's the first of its kind, actually, to be honest with you, in our circles. And I'm very excited for it, and I hope you wish you a lot of tzlach, and I hope people realize what it is, and actually nobody should ever need it, but unfortunately the fact of the matter is most people do need it. A lot of people need it. So Mattis Miller, the floor is yours. Please open it up, tell us what we're here, what we're talking about tonight, and give us a very broad overview. I'm going to be very honest with you before you even start. The emails are pouring in. The amount of questions we have tonight, we can go ad aloisa shachar. So the floor is yours.
Asher and Menachem, thanks so much for having me again to discuss this important topic, and thank you for your kind words and introduction. As you said, tonight is a really important topic, yet a sensitive topic. Obviously, there's a lot of emotion surrounding a lot of these discussions and relationships. It can lead to a lot of pain and judgment, and I think we have to acknowledge that through the process. I think tonight's topic is relevant really to all listeners on some level. You have the young parents who are learning to develop healthy relationships with their children and develop resilient children. You have older parents who are navigating their complex relationships with their adult or married children. And then you have the children themselves, those living at home still, and those adult children and their relationships with their parents in the past or present that may also be experiencing these unhealthy dynamics. And many of them are either unaware of the problems or the causes for these struggles, or they just feel completely stuck and suffocated in these relationships. My hope is that with Hashem's help and a lot of Siyata Shmaya, as we talked about, to raise some awareness, perhaps give a little direction on moving towards this balance, the balance and boundaries in these very difficult, challenging relationships. So I'd like to start tonight to talk a little bit about what is enmeshment, the definition of enmeshment. It is a psychological term that's used. It's not a specific disorder, as we'll talk about. Enmeshment is a relational dynamic that can actually contribute to various emotional and psychological challenges for both parents and children. It's an excessive emotional involvement and closeness with significant others in one's life. We're focusing on parents, it could be with a spouse as well, at the expense of normal social interaction and development, and often involves the idea that these enmeshed individuals cannot be happy without the constant support and the dependence of the other person. And this includes feelings of being smothered by these individuals or fused, as we're going to talk about, this interconnectedness with the individual, which often leaves people feeling empty, lost, having no direction, anxious. And we're going to get all into that, different causes and symptoms and presentation of the enmeshment. And it really impacts the zone of performance and autonomy, where there's this lack of sense of self, confusion around boundaries, which really affects the person and their overall emotional well-being. So that's enmeshment. Where does a parental enmeshment come in? So in its extreme form, a presentation would be where a parent vicariously needs to live through their child. That would be the extreme example or definition of parental enmeshment. Discussions and examples that we'll talk about today may demonstrate that extreme enmeshment, but I think we have to remember, like any topic, there is a continuum of severity. There are varying degrees of unhealthiness and enmeshment in relationships. It's not always black and white. And not all enmeshment, even if there's some, and I'm sure we'll get to this, leads to severe pathology. Doesn't mean just because I have some enmeshment in my parental relationship that I'm going to have some serious significant issues or it's going to affect my relationships and my marriage. So we have to keep in mind throughout that there's this spectrum. At the same time, that doesn't mean if some of the things we discussed tonight do relate to you, that you need some serious psychotherapy, medication, so on and so forth. At the same time, for many people, it is needed. The ultimate goal, really, when we talk about these relationships, is not to go on either extreme, right? Because either extreme is problematic, right? Because complete alienation, poor disconnected attachment through childhood can be very problematic too. You know, children need their parents, and we know not just physically, emotionally, presence, safety, security are a necessity. So it's all about finding that middle path and that balance. As we know, the Torah talks about this constantly. Chazal compare Klal Yisrael to Kochavim, to stars. At the same time, to Kechol, we are compared to sand, the sand on the beach. A star is an enormous object. It's an individual. While sand, it's minuscule grain of sand in comparison. So, however, if you take the sand and you look at all the sand together, connected, creates this beach, a large and vast body. So we need to have our own individuality, and yet we need to be closely connected to those around us. And that's really the whole concept, as we see in halacha and hashkafa and parameters of a yachan and a tzibur. And there's that difference. I mean, even now, we have the Inyan Diyayim, we're coming towards Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it's a Zman of Tshuva, and we have our personal vidoy, which we say quietly. At the same time, we say it as a tzibur, we say it as a klal, we say it as a group. The message is not to be on one's own, because that's not healthy or normal either. The The message is to have balance and to have both. So how do we know if we are personally perhaps struggling with some enmeshment in our lives? So what I want to start by asking, I'm going to read some statements. And as I read these statements, in your mind, you can write it on a piece of paper, 0 to 5, 0 being, this is not true for me at all. 5, this is me. This is absolutely true, this statement. And the reason for that, again, there is a spectrum, there's a continuum. So just because you might have some, but is it very, very true? So as I go through these statements, it's just become awareness, are these things true for me? I have not been able to separate myself from my parents the way other people my age seem to be able to do. My parents and I tend to be over-involved in each other's lives and problems. 3, it is very difficult for my parents and me to keep intimate details from each other without feeling guilty. Next, my parents and I have to speak to each other almost every single day, or else one of us are feeling guilty, hurt, disappointed, shame, alone. I often feel that I don't have a separate identity from my parents. Next, I often feel as if my parents are living through me. I don't have my own life. It is very difficult for me to maintain any distance from the people I'm close with. I'm so dependent on them. Next, I'm so involved with my parents that I don't really know who I am or what I want. I have trouble separating my view and my opinion from theirs. Next, I often feel that I don't have privacy when it comes to my parents. And last, in this section, I feel that my parents are or would be very hurt about me living on my own, far away from them. So as you rated some of those and see if they resonate with you, that would give you some idea or some flag or some awareness that perhaps I'm struggling with some parental enmeshment. Now, the next few statements, similar, but reflecting on the past, on your childhood, and see if some of these resonate with you as well, because we know that a lot of this is multi-generational. It passes from generations to generation. The first, we are so close that we understood each other perfectly. I felt that I did not have individuality or a sense of self separate from my father or mother. I felt that I didn't have my own sense of direction while I was growing up because my father or mother was so strong. They were such a strong person that I didn't have my own sense of direction. And lastly, I felt that we would hurt each other if either of us gone away from one another. So I hope that was clear to give you an idea of if some of these things ring true for you, perhaps this has affected you in some way. So what does this look like? What does parental enmeshment look like? So many people I've worked with, clients, different cases I've been involved in, these individuals very often have difficulty following through with choices and decisions on their own, especially if they're concerned that their parents will be home and be worrying about them. Very often, these individuals are themselves emotionally sensitive people, and they're super empathetic, they're caring, and they're very quick to self-sacrifice and subjugate their own needs to make sure everyone else is okay. Children often, even adult children, are constantly worrying, are my parents going to be okay? If I don't tell them, or they don't know everything's going on, but they get distressed, they're anxious, they're going to have a heart attack, in extreme, they're going to die. And because of that anxiety and worry, they're ending up being very dependent and being overly involved in that relationship. And this leads to a very vicious negative cycle. So what happens is, if you have a child who can't tolerate the parent's distress, and therefore they just give in, and they feel, even if there is a relationship between them and the spouse, and they feel that they have to give in. And over time, that leads to feelings of resentment. And then from the resentment, that leads to feelings of guilt for feeling resentment, which leads to confusion. And this becomes a terrible cycle and very, very difficult to be aware of and to get out of. It's also quite typical that many parents with their children, they don't mean to get involved in an enmeshed relationship, but they can't tolerate their child's emotions. And I speak a lot about this in my work with emotionally sensitive children and parenting work, is that they're not trying to coerce the child per se, or they're not trying to stuff their beliefs or opinions, but because of their own emotion dysregulation, their own anxiety, their own depression, their own frustration and anger dysregulation, they can't tolerate the child's emotions. And the child sees this emotional reaction that's so intense and feels inclined to do anything to make sure the parents don't feel those emotions. And that creates a lot of problem. And a lot of what I teach parents is learning how to make space for their child's emotions and learn to self-regulate so that the child is not burdened with their emotions. And the goal for the child in these relationships is really to learn that they're not doing anything wrong, even though they feel like they are. And it's true, they are the cause of that emotional pain, but that doesn't mean they're responsible for that emotional pain, which is a nuance and a distinction, which is very important to teach that individual. So I want to give you a few case examples that I put together just to give you an idea of the different type of parenting styles or parent-child relationships as a result of enmeshment. So the first example is the overprotected parenting, or as we know, the helicopter parent, right? So Sarah, single mother, close relationship with her 10-year-old son, Shalom. She's constantly worried about his safety, well-being. Is he going there? When's he going to be home? Call me this time, that time. She doesn't allow Shalom to even participate in regular activities with friends unless she's present, so even a younger child, and often is interfering with school and friendships and activities just to make sure that Shalom's going to be okay. And it comes to a point where Shalom has difficulty making his own decisions and frequently is seeking his mother's approval because he's so scared of the world around him. Protection is important. It's essential for safety and development. And too much of anything is not good. And this is too much of a good thing. 2, emotional dependence. You have David, a father, relies heavily on his 14-year-old daughter, Bracha, for emotional support ever since his divorce. He confides in Bracha about his personal struggles, vents his frustrations about life, about work. Bracha starts to feel responsible for her father's emotional well-being and sacrifices her own needs just to comfort him, which impacts ultimately her own social life, her own friendships, her own psychological and emotional development. 3, identity fusion. Miriam and her 12-year-old daughter, Fagi, have this extremely close bond. They have similar interests and hobbies. Miriam often even refers to Fagi, oh, she's my mini-me, we're best friends, you know, we do everything together. And Miriam constantly emphasizes their shared experiences and encourages Fagi to adopt her mom's belief. Oh, don't you love this? Let's go here, buy this. And Fagi actually, as she develops, starts to feel pressure to conform to her mother's wishes, and it becomes difficult for her to have her own opinions, priorities, sense of identity. And that could be really, really problematic. And in this area, actually, there's a spectrum. You know, it could be very often on a more subtle, the parents are inviting the child to make their own decision. Then mom and dad sort of show they're not happy about it. No, you can make this, that's fine, whether they give them the cold shoulder or they ignore or they show their distress and their unhappiness. So the child's getting confused, like they are letting me make my own decisions. At the same time, they're giving these messages, and we know emotions are more powerful than words. And the child is picking up and sniffing every little bit of emotion. And even stronger confusion is that when the parents outwardly criticize and actually maintain authority and judge those experiences. So they're giving the impression to the child that they can make their choice, but they're really not giving them a choice. So that would look like, you can imagine a child walks into an ice cream store and the father says, take whatever ice cream you want, pick whatever flavor, you know, you can get 2 scoops of this or whatever you want, a milkshake. And the child says, oh, I love the rainbow cake cotton candy ice cream. And dad's like, oh, that's disgusting. Are you serious? That's what you're going to pick? Oh boy. Right? So the child's like frozen. No, I know. No, Tati, I'll take the, vanilla fudge. Oh, the vanilla fudge. That's my good choice there, right? So that's what happens, is that the child starts to realize there's a right answer, not their answer. There is a right answer, which can become really confusing and overwhelming for the child. So let's talk a little bit about the diagnosis and potential long-term effects of enmeshment. So as I mentioned before, there's no specific diagnosis in the DSM in terms of criteria, But there are several mental health conditions that are contributed by or influenced by enmeshed relationships. And these include, firstly, dependent personality disorder. And that's individuals who have this excessive need to be taken care of. They cannot make decisions on their own, even small decisions, and they can't maintain boundaries, and they can't take independent actions. I mean, even simple things. Everything has to be looking to the other person, and it actually can be quite impairing. And there is socially, occupationally, relationally, they can't be on their own. Others, which I've talked about in the past here on Coach Menachem, borderline personality disorder. So as we know, people with BPD often struggle with this unstable self-image. They have a lot of fears of rejection and abandonment, and they have difficulty maintaining boundaries, which enmeshed relationships can amplify these challenges. And many of the individuals that I've treated with BPD have had that, these enmeshed relationships, and therefore they're, the cold, hot relationships, blurred boundaries, and they don't develop this clear sense of self and image of self. And their emotions are all over the place, which also contributes to that can be. And of course, anxiety disorders. And so both the parents and the children involved might experience heightened anxiety, blurred boundaries, and dependence, and depression, because this is exhausting and leads to feelings if I can't do things on my own, or I always have to prioritize or follow someone else's opinion or worry about other people. Not only do I get exhausted, I start to feel not good about myself, low self-esteem. I don't get an opportunity to go out in the world and build a sense of mastery and connection. And that can worsen symptoms of depression. And simply, this is not a specific diagnosis. There is avoidant personality, but a pervasiveness of avoidance and procrastination. There's this fear of own decision-making. The most basic decisions they'll stay away from as a result of enmeshment. So with that being said, what can we do to prevent enmeshment as we develop our relationship with our children? How can we go ahead and create and maintain these healthy boundaries and balance, which is essential for, as we talked about, emotional well-being, autonomy, independence. So here are some strategies that can help avoid enmeshment and establish a balanced relationship. Number one is encouraging individuality. We really want to recognize and celebrate our child's unique strengths, their capabilities, their hobbies, their interests, even though they're not ours, their unique qualities, their preferences. And I know that sometimes we're in a system or a culture where certain things are celebrated, but we need to look at our child and see their unique strengths and talents and capabilities. And everyone has something that makes them different and special. We all look different, we sound different, and there's nothing that can replicate each one of us. We have to look for that individuality. It's okay to worry. A mother and father is going to worry. That's okay. The key is not to burden your child with that worry and allow them to take those steps. Examples of that might be revolved around clothing, what yeshiva or school they attend, activities of interest. I remember I had one case where this child grew up in an environment where the mom kept telling the child, "You're just I'm emotional and you're emotional. We're both emotional." And it was true. This child was more emotional and was similar to mom, but the child as an adult was expressing to me how he hated it because it just meant like, "You're mom, you're just like me." And he said, "No, I'm not." And he did everything to pull away from that relationship because he felt that he didn't. Yes, that's true, but I'm also different. I have different strengths. I have different hobbies. I have different interests. That's number one. Number two, respect personal space. We need to allow our child their physical and emotional privacy, as Coach Menachem talked about earlier. We need to respect their personal time to think, relax, engage in self-care. I've had people who grew up in certain homes where parents were like, "What are you just sitting on the couch and doing nothing right now?" And it led to this perfectionist standard. You need to be productive, you need to be doing. I remember I had a client once where there wasn't even couches in the home because you weren't allowed to sit. Not giving them the opportunity to relax, to engage in self-care, to take care of themselves. Examples of that would be as simple as knocking on your teenager's door before you're entering their room, no matter what. Not moving around their stuff. I was just straightening out your room without asking for permission. And certainly a more extreme, looking at diaries, private items, We don't have that right. We need to give them and respect their personal space as they develop. 3, promote open communication. You want to create an environment where your child is comfortable expressing themselves. And yes, without fear of judgment, and yes, that includes anger. It's not fair. Give them that opportunity, that they don't feel if they have a different opinion, or I like this and you like that they have that fear of being judged. And listen actively, empathetically, showing appreciate their values, their perspectives, their opinions. I speak a lot about this in my book and my course about learning how to be mindful and present and validate and non-judgmental and accepting your child, their emotions, their expressions. 4, set clear expectations. Children need boundaries and limits. It gets confusing. There's a reason why there's a parent and a child, and there has to be appropriate rules and responsibilities and expectations, and they communicate those expectations. And that really helps the child understand where they stand and where they're allowed to be and what their responsibilities are so they can develop and build themselves. 5, model healthy boundaries. Demonstrate your own relationships, healthy boundaries, both within and outside the family. Show that it's okay to say no. Mommy needed a day off. Mommy needs some time alone. Model assertiveness and boundaries in a sturdy tone, showing disagreement, standing up for yourself. That will help demonstrate that for a child. 6, support decision-making. Encourage your child to make age-appropriate decisions and learn from their choices. Natural consequences. Don't try to protect them every time something goes wrong in school or with a chavrusa or with a friend. The first answer isn't don't go fix it all. Offer some guidance, but allow them experience natural consequences and balance that with supporting them when needed. But it's really important. Natural consequences help us learn and grow. We're in society, we're cushioning our children on every end. We can't develop children who have a sense of self and a mastery and autonomy. And lastly, empower problem solving. Encourage your child to find solutions for challenges before you intervene. Ask them for their ideas. Obviously, offer some assistance when necessary and focus on helping them build skills to problem solving. With that being said, let's open this up. Let's see if together we could find this balance, take some of these questions. This can be very, very painful and difficult to take in, but I'm hoping this was a clear overview so we can understand what our focus is for tonight.
Mattis, beautiful. You laid it out really clear.
Great. Thank you.
Now we're going to dissect you, okay? If that's okay.
Let's go for it.
Okay, we're going to first take a huge poll that we put together. And everybody, here we go. It's 5-question poll. It's one of the big ones. Okay, I'm going to read it to you, okay? Everybody take your time answering. Answer to the best of your ability. And let's get some clarity from the Olam. How would you describe your relationship with your parents growing up? And do you believe there was any form of enmeshment? There's 4 options. Option number 1, close relationship, experience enmeshment. Option 2, close relationship, did not experience enmeshment. Option 3, distant relationship, experience enmeshment. Option 4, distant relationship, but did not experience enmeshment. That's the first question. Second question, how do you view the concept of parental enmeshment and its potential impact on an individual's life? 4 options, significant impact. It deeply affects one's emotional and psychological well-being throughout their life. Number 2, moderate impact. It can influence certain aspects of your life, but it's not overreaching. Number 3, minimal impact. It has minor factor and people can easily move past it. Or option number 4, this whole thing is an overreaction. It's making a big deal out of something very small. Question number 3. In your opinion, what are the signs of unhealthy parental enmeshment? The signs. Option number 1, extreme emotional dependence on parents. Option 2, limited personal boundaries between parents and children. Option 3, frequent disagreements and conflicts within the family. Question number 4. How can individuals address and overcome unhealthy parental enmeshment? How could you actually overcome it if you experienced it? Number 1, seek therapy or professional counseling. Number 2, set clear boundaries with parents. Number 3, improve communication within the family. Or number 4, read up on it and do your research on this topic. Last question, 5 questions. Last question. How can parents recognize if they're inadvertently fostering dependency and enmeshment in their children? Number one, they should observe their children's emotional reactions and boundaries. Number two, seek feedback from trusted friends or family members. Option three, attend parenting workshops or counseling for guidance. Or option four, try to pull back a little bit and see if your children could survive with less involvement on your part. So those are 5 loaded questions. Read them over again. Choose the best option for the questions. Sometimes there's certain parts we miss. Sometimes there's multiple answers, but just choose the best option. We'll give you a few seconds to respond, and then we're going to share with everybody else. Mattis, there's a lot of polls. I think we're trying to cover every angle over here tonight.
Yeah. It's amazing to watch the information come through.
Yeah. I'm going to give you guys another like 15 seconds because it's a lot. And then we'll take it from there. Again, we have the exclusive having Mattis Miller here, who's one of the best therapists that I know that definitely understand a lot of personality disorders and, family dynamics and children. And please ask your questions. You're here now. Take advantage of it. He wants to answer them. No question is stupid. No question is off topic.
Yeah.
Let's just ask our questions. Anybody has a question, text Usher Farnes over here on the chat. And again, as always, live questions will go first. And if we have time, we'll try to get to the non-live questions. We have already about 20, 30 questions that came in. So we're fully loaded and we're going to try to cover as much as possible tonight. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, ready for the results? Let's share them. Okay, first question. Very interesting. How would you describe your relationship with your parents growing up, and you believe there was any form of enmeshment? 26% of people said they experienced close relationship but experienced enmeshment. 24% close relationship did not experience enmeshment. So basically split. They both had close relationships. One was enmeshed, one wasn't. The second part of the question, the distant relationships, much more people experienced enmeshment as a distant relationship, 35% versus distant relationship that did not experience enmeshment, 15%. It's a very interesting fact. You would think that they were distant, it should be easier.
Well, actually, there are 2 types of enmeshment. There's enmeshment where someone is so close and during childhood, they think that's wonderful and great. And then they're feeling the impact as they get older. And then there's the other that there's a lot of distance in the relationship, but they feel enmeshment through like suffocation. They're very aware that there is an unhealthy boundary and it's blurred. They don't feel close to the individual. So that's why we gave those examples before. There was like that mini me, they're fused together. Then there are those that there's so much hurt and pain, but the person is just constantly self-sacrificing and feeling they don't have a sense of self or that they can't breathe in the relationship. So it actually makes sense that you're seeing both those type coming out in the poll.
The second question is very interesting. How do you view the concept of parental enmeshment and its potential impact in the individual's life? A whopping 74% say it has a significant impact. It deeply affects one's emotional and psychological well-being throughout their life. 23% say moderate impact, 2% minimal impact, and 2% it's an overreaction. The whole thing is a big deal. So very clearly, people feel that it has a significant impact on somebody's emotions and their psychological well-being. Mattis, what do you say to that, Paul?
Yeah. I would say, clearly, of course, those who really struggled or suffered from enmeshment were probably towards the topic, or actually just it says Coach Menachem and Usher Farnes, so they came. But I think probably those who are listening or responding to the poll probably have that. The other thing is, it really goes back to what I said. There's a continuum. So some of us might have had some enmeshment in our lives, but those who had really unhealthy enmeshment had significant impact. I also want to tell you something else, which is important, is that there are certain individuals that are more vulnerable or prone to be impacted by emotional, so someone can be really hurt. Now, again, I just want to clarify that has nothing to do with the person. They didn't do anything wrong that is causing them to be impacted more. That is not their fault. But just because their makeup and the dynamic of the relationship or other experiences in their lives or genetics, that might lead them to experience it more. But the bottom line is clear. This stuff hurts and it impacts us and it's severe and we can't belittle it. And that's what we see from this.
In your opinion, do you think people that are just more sensitive and more caring and more like nicer suffer more versus the people that are just genetically made up a little bit of stronger material and more like internally stronger, or not really?
Can't say that. It's not yes and no. I mean, there are many people who are strong, but their environment is so strong. So there's not an opportunity for them. And then there are those who, I mean, are more sensitive, or perhaps the parent connects to this child versus the other child in some way.
Right.
Or the child is born during a certain, like you said, the divorce, a certain difficult time. So I wouldn't say that's a necessity, but I do think it could be a contributing factor, because those who self-sacrifice and are always worried about other people's pain it would be hard for them to ignore their parents' emotions, while another personality might say, I don't care, you're not happy with me, I'm doing it anyway.
Right. Number 3, in your opinion, what are the signs of unhealthy parental enmeshment? So you have a little bit of a split answer over here. 46% of people say extreme emotional dependence on parents. 42% of people say limited personal boundaries between parents and children. Only 13% of people say frequent disagreements and conflicts within the family. So I guess
I would say the reason is because it's really all the same thing. Because if there's extremely emotional dependence on parents, that means there are really poor boundaries. And really poor boundaries.
Basically, it's the same answer.
And poor boundaries can lead to disagreements. So, I think the first two are certainly very, very much connected.
Okay, let's go to number 4. How can individuals address and overcome unhealthy parental enmeshment? How can we move on from that? 38% of the people say seek therapy or professional counseling. 37% of the people set boundaries with the parents. 22% of the people say improve communication with the family. And only 4% of the people feel read up on it and do your research on the topic.
So I would look at this a little bit of a hierarchy. Obviously, for anyone who's struggling with this issue, you might want to first read up. You might want to try to improve your communication first. You want to try to set clear boundaries. If it's so severe and difficult, that's where therapists and professionals are there for, to help you deal with the emotional pain and the difficulties in the relationships. So I think seek therapy or professional counseling if you probably can't put these things into place on your own. It's just too difficult, or you try to communicate, you don't even know how to communicate. So it really, I think, is all encompassing, because that's what we would do in therapy, right? We would help people set clear boundaries. We would help people improve communication. We would help people understand and have the psychoeducation and awareness of what the struggles are and the themes and the cycles that are going on in their relationship.
Let's go to the last question. Very interesting, also interesting poll. Okay, I'm going to read it. How can parents recognize if they're inadvertently fostering dependency and enmeshment in their children? And the two answers that stick out, that split, is they should observe the children's emotional reactions and boundaries, 42%. Only 4% say seek feedback from trusted family or friends. Only 14% people say attend parenting workshops or counseling guidance. And another 41% try to pull back a little and see if your children can survive with less involvement in your life.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting poll. I like the first response about observing. I would say not only your child's emotional reactions, observe your own. I would add that into the mix there, is to be self-aware of how your emotions are playing a role, perhaps, even if you don't see it. Because sometimes you have to keep in mind, this is important for all parents. Children learn to inhibit their emotional experience when they fear they'll be judged, or they're going to be criticized for their feelings, or it's going to cause another pain. And therefore, you might not be able to observe it. Now, I'm not here to create your anxiety, like, oh my gosh, my kid's a mess and I can't even figure it out. No, of course not. You can, certainly as they're younger. I think it's important is just because a child might not be showing their reaction, that doesn't mean they're not suffering deep inside. I think that's an important piece.
Okay, we got a lot of live questions. I want to cover a few questions, okay? These are good ones. We both are married with a few kids and seeing a lot of nachas. However, my son just got married a few months ago. I realized that he's becoming more and more distant from us and doesn't call us as much and share about his life. I try to call him a lot, but the response is very distant. I'm wondering what I could do as a parent that we should know more about what's going on in his life. What could I do to get more out of him and be more connected with him?
Right. So obviously the first question we would want to ask an individual like that is why? Why do you need to know more about your child's life? Do I need to know more because I'm worried about their safety? Do I need to know more because I'm supposed to know more? Is there a belief? Perhaps they don't understand what their role is at this point. At this point, letting their child go into, you know, the next stage of life, and they have another person, they have a family, they have other focuses. So who says that it is effective or appropriate for them to continue to figure out how to get more information? Now, if the child is suddenly cold and aloof and not sharing basic information, certainly you can have a conversation with them, and depends how the conversation is. Again, it could lead to unhealthy relationship enmeshment, like, you know, you used to call me so often, what's going on? Like, did you forget about mommy and tati? If we're gonna ask the question like that, that's not gonna be very helpful or effective. You could say to the child, if you're really concerned, you could say, you know, I noticed you're a little bit cold lately. Is everything okay? Is there something you want to share? I'm here for you if you do. I don't want you to feel any pressure. I just was worried. And that's about it. I mean, again, it depends if it's really a safety issue and you have to get other people involved because someone's going to be. Of course, there's always a continuum and extreme. And I know sometimes in these shows, people go, well, how about this? You know, at the worst, you know. At the same time, I think general, the whole perspective needs to shift. The child is married now, and they have their own personal life, and they need you to respect their boundaries. And actually, if they feel like you respect their boundaries and space and accept them for where they are, it's more likely that they'll open up. The more they sense your emotion, your disconnect, that can lead to more and more pushback and disconnect.
Yeah. Could we discuss for a minute? Let's say they have a belief that the children should share, should be more connected.
Again, it's all about, first of all, just because we have a belief, they talk about this all the time, they should be more connected. Right? No, they shouldn't be, because they're not. Just because we have a belief of how things should be, that doesn't mean the universe works according to the way we want it. And if you're going to say, well, that's the way every relationship is supposed to be, that's not necessarily true. Are you the one who has an exact understanding of how a relationship be? I remember, I mean, there's extreme. There was a daughter who got married who was sharing personal information with the mom on the time of the month, you know, what was going, that was not, suddenly until someone said, no, you don't have to still be sharing that information with your mom. You know, well, my daughter should be sharing that information, you know. My son should be telling us exactly what his finances are. You know, we always knew what was in his accounts, and we're helping them out now. So we need to see all that, right? So we have our beliefs or our shoulds or our expectations of the way things should be. That does not necessarily mean that that's a way. And again, the more and more you're going to try to, you know, blur those boundaries, it's going to create more problems. And we need to let children, yes, is there a chance they will flounder, or they'll fall, or they'll make a mistake financially? Yes, but that's part of letting them go, letting them develop that autonomy, let them grow, let them work through their marriage. Listen, I don't have married kids yet. And shout out to my wonderful kids who are all watching. I think my Yisrael and my Adina, and perhaps my Esti's still up. But, you know, once they get married, I'm going to worry about them, you know, because that's what parents do. They worry about their children. At the same time, I'm going to have to understand and know my place. That although I worry about them, and although, you know, relationships aren't, you know, they're cautious. There's a process in developing those relationships. That's something for them to work and learn. I've done my part in their life to help them, hopefully with Hashem's help, to get to the healthiest place so they can deal with that. But I have to know my place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mattis, let's go to a live question. Okay, you're on.
What is the overall hashkafa when it comes to kibbud horim for parents who were enmeshed or abusive?
Yeah, so this is why it's super important for mental health professionals in general to work very, very closely with Rabbanim and Poskim, because kibbud avim is, as we know, a super important mitzvah. At the same time, and there's a hashkaf and there's approach, that's not our role, that's not our job. At the same time, it is our job, because people are coming to us, and they are coming to us often because we do share similar hashkafas and values and ideals. And that is something that I think it's really important. It's not, I can tell you, it's not black and white. It's not just, hey, you know, look, all this pain, so let's just wipe them off. I can tell you the amount of pain that's caused by parents and to the children and to the grandchildren and to the whole dynamic over long term is terrible. Often can be potentially. At the same time, sometimes things need to be done, and there is a place, of course. I don't think you'll go to any Rav or Paisik who will say that there is a point somewhere in extreme where, and there's our continuum again, where Cuban of aim is not. Now, you can always, even if you're putting up boundaries or even if you have to limit your interactions, there's ways to do that with respect. It's not, you know, again, I think a lot of people move quickly to the extreme is because, you know, they're hurting me so I can hurt them. But you wouldn't never teach your own children because someone hurts you, you hurt them back. Now, that doesn't mean, again, that there's a place, of course, in extreme cases where a child is, you know, being, you know, really, you know, every time they call, they're being degraded and screamed at and spat at and cursed at, and it has to come to a Rav. But again, I don't see that as when people say keep it of aim, so therefore it goes in the garbage. We're done. It's not all or nothing. There's a whole continuum there, is that we can still have that respect. We can still have that covet for her. And we can still do that despite some of the things that are going on in the relationship.
What about the judgment that comes along with it of decisions that are made? For instance, like not to give a parent a ride somewhere because it means spending too much time in the car together, and someone else may judge that decision.
You mean people will judge the decision as, how could you not go in the car with your parents?
Right.
So I think the first thing is, as we said, you know, if you're going to speak to a Rav and collaborate with a therapist and really understand that the emotional toll of that ride, again, that doesn't mean you don't have to mechabed them or do other things, but being, like you said, being in a car for too long is too painful, it's too difficult, it's too hard, and you have to set up that limit or boundary. And then other people are judging you for that, and that could be really, really painful when other people judge you. I think the important piece is, if you do your work and you understand you're doing the right thing, that you have to really get support from those who are close to you, those who do understand, and really learn, and there are techniques to learn how to respond, not necessarily not respond to the people directly, but respond to the cognitions or the thoughts or the critical thoughts in your head. Oh, I'm so bad, it's so wrong, because a lot of people get intertwined in those negative thinking patterns and become very overwhelmed and guilty, even though they're doing the right thing. And there are different skills and strategies to do that. But I think once you have the right support and you do the right thing, then you got to go opposite that judgment. And you have to learn to look at the judgment in the eye and say, you know, I'm doing the right thing here. And I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to that critical voice. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Mattis. Very good. Sharp. Okay, let's go to the next live question. You're on.
Hi, Mattis. Thank you for coming on tonight. I've read a lot of your stuff, seen a lot of your stuff, and I've used a lot of your stuff. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to know specifically if you didn't use the word tonight, codependency, and I wanted to know if that was specific. That's number one. Number two, your examples that you used. Now I did tune in a little bit into the program, but I think I heard basically what you were saying, and the examples you used sounded more you were gearing it for younger children. Most of your examples, or maybe all of your examples. So when you have a parent that already hit their 50s, 60s, 70s, and let's say you're just bumping into realizing what's going on at that point, I'm curious if the reason why you focused on children is because at that point we have to leave the parents out. It's a little bit late for them to expecting them to be doing the work, and it's going to be on the child to start figuring out how to deal with that issue per se.
Yeah, that's great. Both great questions, excellent questions. I did not specifically use the word codependency. And the reason why I did not is I try to stay away from a lot of this jargon, because sometimes, you know, enmeshment, you could say, is jargon too. Perhaps I don't necessarily see it as that, because it can have a lot of different meanings and people throw around the word. And I'd rather describe specifically what's going on than say, oh, it's just codependency. They're about, and codependency, as we discussed, there are many different forms of these relationships. So, and sometimes people use labels there as an excuse, or to just say, I'm in a codependent relationship, or that person has struggles with codependency, and uses that as an excuse and doesn't really understand what it is. So that's why I try to stay away from that label. The other thing about why, well, even usually, this is not an absolute, I think it starts with childhood and adolescence, and maybe you don't realize the repercussions till later in life, as we've been discussing. So that's why, and I think a lot of the questions that are going to come are going to be talking about those next stages in life. I was just trying to bring out sort of where the development of this enmeshment mostly happens, because really when someone's already living their own life, they're not usually developing an enmeshed relationship, a parental enmeshment relationship at that point. Because basically the idea is, if a child grows up with healthy attachment and a sense of self-efficacy, then by the time they get into adulthood, they have a good understanding of self, as we talk about autonomy of self. Then they have a healthy self, and they can deal with they can put up boundaries where they need to put up boundaries. What happens is, if they're in a very unhealthy environment, that's where it becomes more of a struggle. So even if later in life a parent, is struggling with those boundaries, it doesn't necessarily manifest itself to that degree. It can. I think your point is true also. I think it's true in general, because we have to always understand whether the parent is 50 or 70 or 120. I think we have to understand if there's something is there a point that change is an option? And if not, we have to work towards acceptance and also change within ourselves. Although we're hurt and we're bitter and we're resentful, we need to work through that, because change is not always an option, as you pointed out. Sometimes people are very stuck in their ways. I am going to jump on that. I'm sure the question will come up. But I find that a lot of times people are quick to write off the idea that change can happen. There are a lot of parents, perhaps, who are willing to come into a session with a therapist, who are willing to do family therapy, who are willing to hear another perspective. I know there's some that are very unhealthy who will not after so many years, but there's some that are, and I think we have to keep in mind that can be an option.
So here's a question that somebody sent in. My son is in yeshiva, and I know there are things that he's not sharing with me. So I'm very upset at him. And I told him that as a father, I'm supposed to know everything that's going on in my child's life. So what do you suggest to this father?
Well, firstly, what jumps at me is, like, he's very upset at him. I mean, that's a problem, okay? Because again, as I keep speaking about, if he's so upset or mad at his child, that's not going to help the child feel more comfortable, certainly. And when you're upset at the child, you're looking at the child as if they're doing something wrong. I'm blaming them or judging them that they should. I'm the father. And we have to take a step back and say, just because, again, this is something that I'd wish for, I'd hope for, I desired in my relationship, that doesn't mean it's going to be. And that's, again, finding that balance of respecting. But if the child is going to feel you being upset and not happy, it's certainly not going to be effective in you reaching your goal of having a closer relationship. You want to have if someone doesn't feel safe to open and express and communicate when they're constantly fear of emotion. I remember I worked with, it was a young boy, and now he's an adult, and throughout his parents were divorced, and the father would just demand that they spend time together in a certain place or in a certain way. I don't want to be specific. And he would get so mad at the child for not, like, I'm your father. The father didn't realize, and I was trying to help the child communicate, it wasn't being effective, and eventually to hold up his own boundaries and limits and communicate, and he was so scared of communicating, it was just pushing his child further and further and further away. And it's like, I wanted to tell his father, like, I know how much you love your child. All you want to do is connect. The more you're trying to connect in this way, and being so upset is pushing away. And the other things I said before, we really have to check, who said I'm supposed to know everything's going on in yeshiva with my son? Giving them that space and that privacy is really important. they're adolescents. I mean, they're developing. They need to make their decisions. They need to. I have a child who's now in, base medrash and dorming, and it's not easy. I want to make sure he's okay. At the same time, we need to let go, because that's what's best for our relationship. That's what's best for the child, and that's going to help them be the most healthy.
Okay, let's go to the next live question. You're on.
Hi, thank you so much. So I'm going to come from a little bit of a different angle. I try to be to have a healthy balance with my children, giving them obviously the love and the care, and at the same time trying to foster independence. I'm finding with some of them that they are so super seeking of that enmeshment. It's like a child that's a little bit too big for me to be coming to the bathroom with them every single time. I have to come with them to the bathroom and be involved, and they have to let me know every time they need to go to the bathroom. And again, it's not just bathroom related. It's like everything. They just, mommy, do it, and they need me so super involved at times where I feel that would be more healthy for them to have some independence and gain some independence. And obviously, I try to also be there for them and spend time with them as well. But how would you suggest dealing with that super seeking of that? Like, they want so much enmeshment, and it's not like they're not separating from all different ages, like from 4 through almost a teenager.
Okay, great question. Firstly, you sound like a great mom and quite aware. That's excellent. So my question to you firstly is when, let's say, that child keeps stating that need, and you say, let's say a young child, Maishi, you're a big boy right now. Mommy's going to stay out over here. You can go do, and then you can come to me after. Now it's time to do this on your own. What happens when you try to explain those boundaries and those limits and age-appropriate responsibility? Do you get pushback? And when you get pushback, do you stand your ground? And
so yeah, a lot of pushback, tantrums, pushback, pulling, constant pulling. Do I stand my ground? I mean, depending on which kid and how old they are.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I find it interesting that all your children are they all struggling with this? Is it one or two?
Some more than others.
Okay. It's really hard to know what the cause is. There could be something else going on that, again, I'm not one of these therapists who sit here and say, oh, okay, let's dig in. Oh, it's probably this, or something happened here or in school. What you're describing is some age inappropriate behavior that's consistent and followed by a lot of tantruming and screaming and yelling, and which is not the norm. And I don't know, maybe giving a specific example of one of them. So if you're standing your ground and they're still not responding, is it because there's an intermittent reinforcer? There's someone else in the environment, another sibling or another parent who is reinforcing their behavior in some way? Is it really?
No, it's really just they want mommy to be so tightly involved in every part of their life. It's really the uniform thing with the ones that I have it with.
Right, which is beautiful. But what happens when mommy says no? Is mommy saying no, or is mommy's guilt or feeling bad? Like, are they feeling that from you? Or do you think, are you able to really self-regulate and let them go? Or as soon as they tantrum, or within minutes, you're like, fine. That would help me understand a little bit more.
I think eventually I end up giving in, just because I either the tantrum is getting too much, or I don't know, maybe the kid really does need me, and
okay, great.
You don't know where that boundary is. Maybe there's something wrong, and maybe that child, let's go with the 4-year-old. Maybe there's something going on and she needs me in the bathroom with her. I don't know why, but I do put up a fight at first. No, we're very big. We don't need to go in together. I'm outside the bathroom. I'm waiting for you, like that.
These are two things that are really important to think about. Okay. Number one is, you said, is if they tantrum a lot, and I don't know what that looks like. Okay. There is a possibility there's something else. The reason why I'm saying likely not is because if you're finding a theme with your children, it seems that it might be related to the environment, but I can't tell you that absolutely, and I would have to get history. But let's go with the assumption it's environment, because I know people are saying, well, maybe he went through trauma and he's expressing himself and he needs, let's move that away for a moment. So what I would tell you, two things I'm hearing. Number one is that you are eventually you know, I don't know how long giving in, because you just can't deal with the tantrum, you can't deal with emotion, you're overwhelmed, there's a lot going on, which is completely valid and understandable, but that is reinforcing the child's behavior. The other thing is then you're getting insecure yourself. And the kids are picking up on that, like, oh, maybe they do. And there is your own anxiety. And of course, there's risks we take with our kids. You know, sometimes and there's the potential. But if you see, and you're a good mom, as it appears you are, and you're observing and you're seeing and you're checking, I would actually experiment with you to really validate their emotions, make space for their emotions, but work on consistently being assertive and not giving in for a period of time, and actually see what happens. And you have to have your own work to be aware of your own emotions and self-regulate and empower and have your own confidence to be able to do that, to step away and allow themselves and understand you're doing what your children need for the long term.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mattis, Murdick, let's go to the next live question. It's a phone call question. You're on.
What can a parent, a father do who came from a divorced home, do for his children now to have the best relationship with his children?
An excellent question. Obviously,
Mattis,
I think,
Mattis, can you clarify the question, because I didn't hear it?
Yes, I'm going to clarify the question. I think what you're saying is that you see there's a child who came from an unhealthy environment and it impacted them. There's no doubt. You see the impact, and here you are parenting them now. What can I do to help them be the most successful adults, help them address some of their past emotional difficulties, and ensure that there are better dynamics, and address the potential enmeshment that hurt them. Is that correct?
So it's the parent themselves that comes from a divorced home.
The parent came themselves from a divorced home, and they
now have children that they're raising, and so how can they have the best relationship with their children, since they came from a divorced home and they didn't have the best? They weren't brought up with.
Yeah. Were you there by the beginning of my talk today?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I think you spoke about that.
Yeah, you remember I listed all the different things we can do to help protect our children from enmeshment?
Yeah.
Yes. So those are like the Rush Pruk, and those are the headlines of the areas. But
okay.
but really, and I would suggest you go. By the way, you can email me, M Miller. You can put that in chat. mmiller@cbtfnj.com if you want me to just post some of those different areas. There's great reading out there also on developing healthy. I don't have a book on top of, off my head in that area, but healthy relationships with your child and knowing your limits and boundaries. But those are really the areas that you have to encourage their problem solving. You have to allow for their privacy. You have to put limits in place. Understanding age-appropriate boundaries when they want to get overly involved in your lives. This is I'm having a discussion with Daddy right now. This is not a discussion for you. Helping them understand what their place is. Allowing their own interests and preferences and opinions, even if they're not things that you certainly like or want or approve. Of course, there are certain things, like we talked about, as a balance. So those things will all help that child develop healthier.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let's go to the next live question. Let's see if they're ready. Hold on. Could I unmute now? Okay, unmute. Okay, there you are. Hi.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. I'm talking about a married child, and their parent is like controlling, and they feel the need to distance themselves. And I know you said there's a range, but my question is more like, should they discuss with the parent the issue and give the parent a chance to maybe like learn new ways and create boundaries, or should they just do what they need to do because it's just so much, and then the parent is left hurt? Like, they know they need to distance, but should the parent also have a clue like what's going on?
What do you think?
I think yes. I just don't like, what are the steps? Like, I don't think just anyone should walk away from a parent.
I'm with you. Excellent answer. It's in with you. Go with your gut. Why can't I communicate? I mean, in all our relationships, we communicate. And a relationship between a parent and child is one of the most important relationships in our lives. We communicate at work, we communicate with our partners, we communicate with our bosses, we communicate with our children, we communicate with our spouses, we share when things are hurtful without judgment, we help them understand. Now that it's not always effective, there are great skills and strategies. A lot of times people communicate and they don't have the skills or the strategies. And it's a lot of the work that therapy sometimes we do. We teach people how to effectively communicate, and it's not easy. I'm with you.
I know, but I see a lot of people, like my age group especially, or even like a little younger, and they're married, and they just say, "Okay, I'm an adult now. I don't need my parent now," and they just walk away. And they tell me like, "Oh, you don't like what your parent's saying?" And I know my gut, like I'm never gonna do that.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna do that. But I just don't understand people who can't. So I'm like, isn't there enough bias to a parent that gave you everything to at least have that conversation if it becomes overbearing?
Two things I'm gonna say to you. First of all, just because we think something should be a certain way doesn't mean it is. It goes back to every other discussion that we had is, of course, you and I wish that people would act a certain way or would be more thoughtful or understanding, but this is where they're at. And we can help. We have Coach Menachem and Usher Parnas to help educate and inform people and enlighten people that there is another way, that there is help, that there's awareness, that there's effective communication. And I think judging other people and saying, well, what's wrong with them and how dare they, is not going to help us give that message over. It's going to be understanding that they're in pain. And I think one thing is perhaps for those individuals to think about their children and say, you know, what message you want to give your child? What do you want to tell your child when they're older? By the way, if I do something you don't like, just don't talk to me again. Is that what they'd want? Sometimes that can help. I'm not saying you should do that with your friends per se. It might not be effective. If they're really open to understanding and they want to hear you, that might be something to say, listen, you know, is that advice you would give your child to a friend, to a really close friend for many years who says something they don't like? Would you say, okay, I'm done with you, I'm fine new friends? I highly doubt it. Next. Did I answer that question clearly?
I think so. You're still on the phone.
Okay. It's hard. I have to, by the way, I just wanted to say to that woman who just came on, I respect what you're saying and expressing and feeling. And I get why there's frustration. It makes sense. It's hurtful to see that process. And I can tell you personally, I've seen children who are very, very hurt by parents in extreme ways and I see parents who feel they never got a chance. They're so desperate. They're ready to change. They want to connect to their children. They're willing to hear the mistakes they made, but the child is not dealing with their own emotions and just dealing with it by shutting out. So there's a cause why the child doesn't want to deal with it too. Either they're overwhelmed or they have their own emotions or their own issues or struggles. There's a lot of pain out there.
Okay, Mattis, let's go to the next live one. You're on.
Hi. What advice could you give specifically for avoidant personality due to enmeshment?
Yeah, so avoidance is a coping strategy. It could become it could be adaptive or it could be maladaptive. And it's an overdeveloped strategy. I mean, there are certain times we need to avoid. If there's an unhealthy environment or unhealthy person or setting that you've tried again and again and again, you need to stay away. Reminds me of when I was working many years ago in a residential setting. I worked we each had a cottage, and it was a campus for children and adolescents with severe psychiatric disorders, among different learning disorders and special education, and they were there on the campus. And I was given a certain cottage, a group of adolescent girls, the yeshiva guy, that's what they chose for me, which was quite complicated in itself. I was given this group, and I was the clinical manager. There was like a residential manager, woman, and no matter what I did, everything was bad. I was the first yarmulke on that campus that ever, that existed, I believe. It was actually funny because now there are a lot of yarmulkes on that campus. That campus eventually became the Durham, Connecticut Waterbury campus. Funny enough, it's about a half hour from Waterbury, Connecticut, 40 minutes. I worked there before, and I tried everything, and I was just, nothing I could do was right. And I just ended up just avoiding, because I couldn't make the person happy. And it was a bracha. She started spraying such horrible things about me. She got fired, which was just, it was a bracha from Hashem. But the bottom line is it was necessary for survival. Like, it just wasn't working. I tried everything. So avoidance is really important. So if someone grows up in a relationship which is so unhealthy, and as a result of that, they had to avoid, it was their default way of dealing with that. It was necessary for survival. The problem with that avoidance is that it becomes overdeveloped and maladaptive when it's used in healthy contexts and relationships. And then they start going out in the world and they start avoiding anything that's uncomfortable. Even if their spouse says something or someone does something or any situation, they just have this pervasive avoidance because of the struggles they were going through. So the first thing is we don't want to do is we really want to help them understand when they go into that mode, and help them differentiate into what's safe environment and non-safe environment, and where the trigger is coming from. And if their emotions are out of proportion for what's going on, so a lot of self-awareness, and then teach them, once they have that awareness and they can understand what's linking to their childhood and what's based in the present, is to actually make behavioral changes and test those relationships and take risk and put themselves in those situations and be able to go opposite that and understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy and adaptive and maladaptive. Does that give you an idea?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mattis, we're rocking over here. There's a lot going on over here. Okay, next live question, you're on.
I'm wondering how narcissism plays into this. I'm 32 and I have my own family, Baruch Hashem, and I'm starting to realize that I think my mother is probably a narcissist. She causes me a lot of pain. And I don't know if that's connected to enmeshment, or what. I don't know. Is this a different topic?
No, you're actually right. It's very, very connected to narcissism, because a narcissist, someone who's struggling, with narcissistic issues, I'd rather say it like that, is someone who does not take any responsibility and blames the others for the struggles in their environment, and tries to control that environment or that relationship in any way possible, as a way of keeping themselves safe, and therefore they won't allow the others to develop their own interests, their own opinions, and they're giving these subtle messages like, "Are you serious? Like, that doesn't make sense. It's crazy." And they're putting down that other individual's or the child's thoughts or ideas, and giving them lots of positive when they're shining in ways that, oh wow, that's a good test mark. There we go, boy. That's good. Now we're doing it, right?
Yeah.
So it's very closely related. It could be a whole discussion in itself. Many people who grow up with parents who struggle with narcissism, can certainly experience a lot of unhealthy parental enmeshment.
So, because now I'm coming to the point where this ties into the question a couple times ago. I kind of just don't want to talk to my mother. I'm trying to avoid talking to her at all. We don't live in the same city. Every time I talk to her, I hang up exhausted and in a bad mood, and then I take it out on my family. And so I do kind of want to just stop. I don't think that it's ever going to help to really, bring the topic up like, hey, I think you're a narcissist. Like, wow, I don't know. So
Yeah. So my first comment to you is, I'm not in your situation, and I can only imagine what that's like. And it's easy for me to sit here and preach to you what to do or not to do. So I'm just validating that pain and exhaustion in your family life. So I don't want to take away from any of that. With that being said, is probably that communication directly in certain types of communication might not be effective. But one thing that we do know is effective if they are still, definitely, or if they are struggling with the issues of narcissism, is using leverage, and leverage communicating leverage in a healthy way, and perhaps, and giving you the strength, empowering you, because it sounds like those conversations are exhausting. But perhaps saying to mom, listen, I'm not going to be able to continue to have these conversations unless we go to therapy together, or unless you go. I know that you're in therapy with someone working on this at the same time, obviously, or even, I don't know to what degree you've tried to communicate using other skills and expressing and asserting yourself. Also, there's that difference between staying on that phone call and staying on that for 20 minutes and staying on that phone call for 3 minutes. And putting up that limit and saying, Mom, I'm not doing this. I'm here. I'm sharing it. But if you're going to have this conversation, I'm gonna hang up. I love you. I care about you. But I'm gonna hang up the phone now. And you hang up the phone, and then she's gonna call you 55 times, and you're not gonna pick up the phone. And then the next time, you're gonna pick up the phone, and you can say, Mom, I'm so happy to talk to you. We can talk, but you understand if the conversation you start to do A, B, and C. I don't want to give too specific advice because I don't know the dynamic and I don't know the situation, but I'm just trying to help you become aware that there is things that can be done, and also self-care for you, because there is a price tag of totally breaking it up, obviously causing her pain, causing you pain, causing the children, the grandchildren, the family. And perhaps if she hears that you're serious and she is desperate for this relationship, the action could be made.
I don't know how desperate she is. I have a brother who's more like the golden child. There's that whole dynamic, and he abused me. He sexually abused me when we were kids, and I told my mother, and she oh, he was just joking. I brought it up a couple times, and and then he, now as adults, he, with his family, he's always welcome at her house. And a couple of Pesachs ago, he told me I shouldn't come to my mother's house. He uninvited me it's not even his house. Wow. And she doesn't do anything. She doesn't stand up to him. She doesn't say, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. If you don't want to be with her, then you stay home. Nothing. Wow. So there's this whole dynamic that's so painful. It comes up every 6 months because it's every Pesach, who's going where. And we're at the point where just okay, we're just going to stay home and you all can party without us. I don't know. But it's still very painful.
Yeah, beyond, and that's what we call traumatic invalidation. I can't even imagine what is that. And certainly don't bring up that conversation or ask her again. If you tried it twice and you got that response, that's just going to lead to a lot of pain and trauma for you. What I would tell you, though, is you would be surprised. You would be surprised. I know it probably doesn't feel like she wants the relationship, but she probably wants the relationship more than you think. I can't tell you that absolutely because I don't know your mom and I don't know the dynamic, but very likely is she just wants the relationship on her terms. And right now it's sort of working on her terms. And the question is, where could you start to put up those limits and boundaries and balance there, and assert yourself? And when you've been broken by so many years, you need the help to empower yourself. But again, of course, it's understandable you want to just break off the relationship, and that makes sense. That doesn't necessarily mean that is the only way, and that might feel good for the short term, but it also might hurt you in the long term, as different symptoms and different things come up. So there's help, and there is a balance, and this is a really extreme case, and I would say like this, you probably need some professional help along the way, because this is not simple. It sounds quite complicated.
It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And she'll come and visit, and she'll even do the same kind of stuff with my kids. And I want to smack her, she's like favoring my son over my daughter, and I'm like seeing it happen before my eyes, and my daughter's like upset, like, why is Bubby doing this with him and not with me? And I'm like, because she's crazy. Like,
Well,
it's
well,
crazy.
I want to say that's the difference between you and mom. Someone asked the question is, how can I stop this process of a parent, a child who suffered with enmeshment and not pass it on? Is that where you don't have to say she's crazy. You're going to say, you're going to really validate that emotion and let her express it, because you
Yeah.
probably didn't have an opportunity as a child to express it and say, how dare you say that? We don't talk like that in this house. Right?
Exactly.
There was no opportunity for you to express your feeling. So again, I think there's help here in how to put those boundaries down, yeah, and be able to say, you know, Mom, I want you here. I want to invite you over. But if the A, B, and C are going to happen, I can't have you over in the house. We can meet up somewhere for coffee, you know, or you can come for an hour and see the kids.
No, because we live in different states. Like, it doesn't.
Okay, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty. My point
Right.
is,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, spending a yontif together with the kids is different, but that doesn't mean, okay, there's nothing. There can be, you know, that middle ground.
So would you say in a nutshell that it's possible to have a relationship with a narcissistic parent as long as there are clear boundaries? That's a key.
It's clear boundaries and something called empathetic confrontation and leverage. There's a great book by Wendy Bahari. It's called Disarming the Narcissist.
Disarming the Narcissist?
Correct. That might be helpful and talk about. Again, that doesn't mean that this is true for everybody and it's going to work for everybody. And as I said on the onset, there might be those cases where you do have to end the relationship or, you know, make it very, very minimal. And I'm not saying not. And I'm not speaking, and if I was in your case, maybe I would have been out of there a long time ago. You know, I get that. I'm not saying that. At the same time, is yes, there are strategies and skills and things that we can do that can improve. I'm not saying it's ever going to look how we would like it to look or how it should look, that we can improve some of those dynamics.
Okay, Mattis, Murdick, let's get into some more questions where that came in. It's a good question. I'm a divorced parent dedicated to raising my 3 children in a healthy environment with clear boundaries. I make conscious effort not to involve any of them in our past issues or negative aspects related to the other parent. When discussing with the other parent, I always maintain a respectful tone or simply refrain from saying anything negative. However, a significant challenge I face when the other parent frequently engages in negative talk and brings up private issues from our past marriage. This behavior not only affects our relationship, but also puts the children into their problems, making them feel responsible for providing support. Astonishingly, even though the children are getting older and they start recognizing this is not a healthy dynamic, they still feel strong obligation to be there for that parent and protect that parent, that unhealthy parent, despite my efforts to foster a healthy, non-contentious relationship between us.
So firstly, again, acknowledging the pain of the healthier parent looking on the other side, trying to do everything for their children and not putting the burden and the worry and the responsibility and understanding boundaries and letting them develop into children and young adults while you're saying your ex do the exact behaviors that are problematic. And then you're trying so hard, you know, trying to be respectful and not because you've read all the books, you know, that's certainly not helpful to get stuck in that negativity and that cycle of judgment and still seeing the effects of that. And I think the first thing is we have to realize is that we are a product of our environments, and therefore our nature is going to there's nature and there's nurture, and the nurturing is going to affect the individual. The other thing I would say is remember, just because they have some of these tendencies and perhaps they're even aware of that, that doesn't mean that they're going to look to that extreme of unhealthiness. Is that there is that continuum. And if there have a balance, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen children come from environments where there was a healthy role model and an unhealthy, and the healthy was enough to balance out. That doesn't mean they didn't struggle and they didn't have anxiety or depression or different struggles and relationship struggles, but there was a huge difference as opposed to being in a completely either one parent unhealthy or 2 parent unhealthy environment. And the other part of this is acceptance. Like we need to accept, as I've talked about on the last class, a thing I always say. Pain plus non-acceptance equals suffering. Pain plus acceptance equals pain, and sometimes intense pain. And it is painful to see your children like that. We have to accept that, and fighting it and shoulding it, and how can it be? I did everything, and being angry at my ex, and that's just going to lead you to suffering, getting stuck, rather than saying, this is what it is. It's exactly as it should be, because that's what's going on. Remind myself there are so many aspects of my children that I was able to give them. Remind you, you said yourself in the question, the person says they're aware of it. You know how huge that is, that they're aware of those tendencies, and they have their lifetime to work them through and see a professional and get the help and get the guidance and work through that stuff. It's huge. There are people in their 40s, 50s, first realizing, what's going on. And this person has given that to their children. And another thing is, a lot of it is like, we hear all these things and, oh, they grew up in this environment and that's it, they're going to be done and they can't have a healthy family. It's not true. We built a whole world out of the Holocaust. Okay. And I'm not saying, I'm not from that generation. And I'm not saying there was not tremendous struggles for those people here. And I cannot speak of that and what they've went through. But we are resilient people. We are resilient as part of humanity, and having that awareness and healthy support system can help an individual develop and grow.
Wow, it must be hard. Here's another hard question. Our in-laws have generously assisted us with our finances in the past. I'm truly grateful for that. However, recently they've become increasingly involved in our lives, offering unsolicited advice to my husband about how to manage our money and our children. While I value their support, this level of involvement feels unsustainable, given our reliance on their assistance. What would be the best way to proceed to respectively ask them to give us the trust, to let us make our own decisions, but not offend them?
Yeah, so the first thing, this is a complicated situation, and I'd say it's not uncommon, especially sometimes parents wrongfully, rightfully, they feel like, well, we're supporting you, we're giving you all this, we're working so hard, so we have a right to ask these questions. You can't have your cake and eat it too, sort of concept. At the same time, part of it is, they are getting over involved in places, and you want both. The other thing that you pointed out in the question is that fear of judgment, that fear of them being unhappy. And I think that's really the emotion is keeping the person controlled, because they're scared of experiencing that emotion. And I think it's important for the person to really look at, are they catastrophizing that emotional experience? Can they deal with that emotion, that pushback from the parent when they describe or they express? And they really have to go in understanding, where are they? Are they willing to give up the support? Understanding the pros and cons, and say, you know what? I'm going to let go of these chains if this is what it comes with. Or perhaps they have a conversation and they say, Tati, I appreciate all the help that you're giving us, and it means the world. And mommy, we would not have been able to do this without your support. And we hope we can do this for our own children one day, just like you're doing for us. At the same time, I know we have a lot of karasato, but there are certain discussions that myself and my husband are not comfortable with. And I know it might be hurtful to hear that. I can imagine it's hurtful, that I don't want to hurt you. I'm just trying to do what's best for my family. And I know you care about my family and what's best. So I'm going to ask, that we don't discuss these pieces anymore. And if you could do this for me, and you could be understanding and still provide the support, that would mean the world to us. Really, really. And let's say the parent says, that's a karasato. Okay, fine. We won't say a word. We won't say anything to you. You just want the check in the mail, we'll give you the check in the mail, okay? Just know that, I don't know what happened to that daughter we brought up, okay? And they leave the conversation. Then you have to work on your own emotions. I mean, you did a wonderful job asserting yourself, okay? And the check still comes, but they gave you some that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. That doesn't mean it's your responsibility. That doesn't mean you have to make them feel better, right? Now, you might say, well, I don't want to deal with that emotion. At the same time, you want the money, right? So, but I think a lot of it is our ability to sustain, to sit there with that emotion and that experience and empower ourselves and get this from our spouse, from our teachers, from our rabbeim, from our rabbanim, the support that we can talk about that experience, what that interaction was like at the same time. And by the way, I just want to say there are a lot of, just like we're talking about how our parents, there's a lot of wonderful parents, really wonderful parents. And often when you say and communicate in an effective way, they might be a little disappointed, they might be hurt, but they'll take a step back and say, okay, we'll try. You know, that could happen, by the way. It's possible. I know in the extreme cases not. So I think it's really important to be able to, you know, in the question it was so clear, I don't want to be criticized. So to be able to go opposite that and get the support if you're criticized, but put up those boundaries and those limits.
Okay, Gavaldig, Mattis. Let's go to the next live question. You're on.
Hi, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My mother is an extremely complicated woman, and I've been struggling to deal with her all my life. And now she's a fresh almana. So I'm trying to make an effort to spend time with her and speak to her more, and I feel like it's draining me. It's really affecting my functioning on a daily basis. Since I grew up in a very unhealthy and dysfunctional home, I feel that I'm dealing with her is really unraveling all that I've mended in my life. How can I stay sane while continuing to keep our relationship alive?
Great question. You sound like a very special person for really, you know, giving so much of yourself despite, it's just a beautiful example of trying to be mechabed despite the pain that was caused all those years. And I've been saying something throughout, and I think it's just an important theme, is people tend to go to extremes. And I think, of course, self-care, and again, with the guidance of Rabbanim here, I'm not giving any psak in terms of kibbud avim and things like that, but going to the extent or to the extreme of then spending hours of time and taking her places and doing things, versus going there an hour a week. I'm just giving an example. And maybe that is doable. It doesn't either we have to throw myself in self-sacrifice and it's so exhausting, versus not doing it all. And maybe when I'm pushing myself too much, my body is telling me something. It's saying, this is too much. I need to take a little bit of a step back and see how that goes. And then maybe that's still too much, a little bit more, till I could find a balance that works. So I think is you can maintain, at the same time, you have to validate that emotional experience and that exhaustion. And you can't push yourself too much. So where can I be there for her on some level, but perhaps I need to take a step back and not take on too much. And that's going to actually help your relationship. I keep saying this, because if you're in an emotionally better place, that will help you be able to be there for your mom in a better place.
Right.
If you start building that resentment and that frustration and that, Ma, I can't, Ma, it's just going to come out, and then you're going to feel the guilt, that vicious cycle again. So you got to take care of yourself so that you can know, where is that balance? It's all about finding the balance.
Right. But she has a way of like triggering me, and it just really takes me to the next level. And I really, really have a hard time with it. And I've been in such a better place. And since I'm dealing with her more the last couple of months, and I'm focusing on being there for her, since she's, pretty lonely, I find that, and I have less and less energy for her. I hear her voice and I just lose it.
Yeah. So two things. First of all, a decision you have to make, and you're back in that environment and you're being triggered by things she's saying, and those triggers aren't necessarily based on the present, but it's activating emotions and memories and sensations and experiences from the past based on that relationship, which leads to motion and dysregulation and saying things and impulsivity and things like that. Professional help can help you with that. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to invest a little bit into this relationship and get some professional help to be able to deal with my triggers, help me regulate my emotions. Again, at the same time, taking that step back too, because maybe there's less triggers, you can handle more of it. But there is help out there to can help you sustain the relationship. And yes, why doesn't she go to therapy? The question, let her get help. Why am I going up? She caused this to me, right? Which is true, perhaps. But what's the effective approach? She's not going, you know that. Right? Or it's not likely she's going. I shouldn't say it's an absolute, right? Perhaps. But if that's something you might want to do, you say, you know, this is my mother. And I want to be there for her. And I hear that in your voice. I don't want to just let go, but it's taking too much out of me. Let me get some professional help because it's an investment for me. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing this for me, to help me be a healthier person, for me to have the ability to be in this relationship and have those boundaries and be aware of my triggers and know how to deal with those triggers and regulate them and address the past trauma experiences and process it so that I can be able to be more present in this relationship with which is your goal, if that's your goal.
Yeah. It's my goal. It just feels unattainable, but I guess, yeah, if I have proper guidance, then
yeah, and attainable doesn't have to be complete. You know, sometimes just those small steps can make a huge difference. And with the right help.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Mattis, I want to jump on this question. It's a little different angle. I'm an 18-year-old girl, and I'm the oldest in my family. My mother really means well, but but I feel she doesn't let me be. She wants me to go shopping with her. I should buy her things she likes. I should share everything with her. I discuss with my friends. The list goes on and on. I'm not sure if this is what a parent-child health relationship should be with a mother, and if not, what I could do.
Yeah. So I think all of us here, when we hear it, it sounds extreme. And that's the thing. Of course, going shopping with mom is wonderful. And of course, hearing mom's opinion is important, right? I'm sure my mom's listening. I still ask her opinion sometimes. Right? So that's there's a healthiness to that, to be able to ask opinion. But when this 18-year-old girl is feeling suffocated and it's successive to the degree where it's impairing her other social relational friendships, or where she doesn't have the ability to express herself or her own opinions or make her own decisions, that's problematic. And again, it's really hard when this is going on, and and that's where, again, the help can be. The answer is not, okay, fine, just stop, tell mom I'm done with you and leave, right? Is to learn how to communicate that, to have family therapy, perhaps. Tell mom I need some help. Get a teacher involved, or mechaneches, or someone who can help guide the girl on how to, be a little bit more expressive and assertive and clear about her needs, and help empower her. Not empower her to scream at mom and judge mom and yell at mom and sit there and say how she's a terrible person, but empower her to be able to put up her lines and say, mom, I'm sorry, I can't go shop. What do you mean you can't go shopping? We always go shopping. I can't go shopping. Why? Because I can't go shopping. I'm going with my friends today. Well, your friends are more important to me? No, I can't go shopping. I'm going with my friends today. Well, that's really not nice. I'm hurt. I'm sorry, hurt mom, but I'm going to go shopping with my friends today. I'll see you later, right? Easier said than done. I know you're all thinking that. I'm guessing you're all thinking that. But this is learning. This is learning, and it's hard. Now, the environment is very controlling, and the person has narcissistic issues, and they're very powerful and strong. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. But again, sometimes those parents if they really want what's best for their child, and sometimes they do, they're just not aware of what the child is experiencing, and they think it's all good. Sometimes getting some family therapy. Family therapy is very powerful. It's one thing I realized in my career. It's not done enough. I don't know if it's in our from circles, but there's not enough family therapy of getting all the parties in the room. Sometimes because parties aren't willing and things like that, or time, we're all busy, coordination, but it could be powerful.
That's why many people are not happy when they hear the therapist tell their daughter to stick up for themselves and not go shopping. And this brings us into the next question. Why do so many therapists advise to disconnect from their parents? My son has been married for 5 years. Since he started therapy, he started talking about boundaries and is totally disconnected with us. Why do therapists feel that disconnecting from parents is a healthy approach? And this question comes up many times. Many people feel that way.
Yeah, I can't speak for many therapists. Okay, I can speak for myself and for my practice. And I don't think to date, or even in our practice, that I totally recommended someone completely cut off relationship with their parents. Again, there are circumstances that would be appropriate, and there are times I've had children removed from their environment, or because there was complete. But as almost generally, that was not the recommendation. So you talk about totally cut off, and then you talk about boundaries. Those are two different things, right? And I think boundaries is something, yes, we talk about boundaries, and we talk about that you have a sense of self and your person. You're a star and you're the sand, okay? You're a yachad and you're a tzibur. I think going back to what we said before is that you need limits around you, and you're not your parent. This is parent-child, right? It's not parent-child, right? At the same time, there's a lot of closeness over here to a parent-child. And yes, there's distance as they get older. And that's the goal, by the way, because if your child is developed and healthy in adolescence, you want them to start doing things on their own. It's a celebration, right? That they can start. Your whole goal is you want to bring this child to be out, to leave them. You're not going to be there for them forever. You can't support them forever. And what happens, the whole cycle reverses, and then they're taking care of you. And that happens all because of your healthy development and connection and attachment. And then it turns over the other way. So the answer is I think, yes, there is this idea. And we've actually had parents come to our practice, and specifically because they've been to other therapists. And we've seen this, who told them to completely cut off, and they brought their next child here because they wanted that to happen. And these are parents who are open. They were open. There are parents who are closed. There are parents who are abusive. I'm not here taking sides, but I think we're very, very quick to go to extremes. And I think that's a consistent message I've been giving throughout our talk today. And that's why the topic is all about balance and boundaries. And I think setting limits and boundaries and communicating. And by the way, that could be followed with, Ma, I'd love to go shopping with you tomorrow. I just really want to go with Kayla today. Okay, that's okay. It doesn't have to be, Ma, I'm not going shopping. No, Ma, I'm not going shopping. No shopping, right? It doesn't have to be that. Now, again, there are some of you are on this call and say, no, you don't understand my parents. You don't understand that. And I don't. And there are those cases, and there are extremes. But I think there's a lot there in the middle ground. And I think sometimes, again, I know parents who are crying and crying and crying for years. They have not seen their grandchildren's bar mitzvahs. They have not been at brisim. They have not been at weddings. They have not been at simchas. And they're so desperate to just sit down with them and talk. They're so desperate, and they're crying for it, but there's no communication. Zero. And it's so, I mean, imagine for even as the child who's struggling with a parent, can you imagine if our children did that to us? So it's both ways. It's both ways. And I know there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of frustration, and it's valid. And
somebody just sent an email like an hour ago. My daughter just had a baby boy, and they told me not to come to the bris because it'll be small and for friends only. She lives on the East Coast, and I live far away. How should I respond to this?
Yeah, and again, you see, it's both ways. Clearly, Asha is a great example. And to call up her daughter and say, I'm sure, and I don't think I don't know if you're aware, like, if possible, it would mean the world to me to be at that bris. Is that, obviously this is your simcha, and I feel connected. I want to be part of this simcha. And if there's something I did that hurt you in any way, please tell me, because I want to understand and I want to know. But I just didn't want you to schlep. It's small. I say, I know, but I want to schlep. I want to be there. So again, if it's not always on the parent end. Sometimes the child has so much anger and they've never expressed that anger or wrath. And by the way, fascinating, I've had people sit in therapy, scream. I go through imagery sometimes using different strategies, scream at their parents and yell, and this is not fair and you treat, because they never had an opportunity to say that. It's all in imagery. And guess what happens? They get closer, not further. It's amazing to watch because it helps them process that emotion and get out that anger and make sense, and then move to a place of more acceptance and peace and compassion. That doesn't mean they're happy with the relationship. That doesn't mean they don't still have limits and boundaries, but that actually leads to closeness and connectedness because there's so much stuff that's in the way.
Okay, let's go to the next live question. Hold on. This is the middle of unmuting. Okay, you're on.
Yeah, hi, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you for all your information. Very informative. I have an opposite question than the rest of the questions until now, is that it's just the opposite for me. I'm in therapy for an enmeshed relationship with my mom. However, I cannot see, while I'm in therapy for a while, more than a year, you know, I cannot see my mother's faults as, because she was going through a difficult marriage while I was growing up, and it became enmeshed, and she was relying heavily on me. I was the daughter alone between boys, and now while I'm healing, as she realizes also her mistakes, she sees where she went wrong. So she's kind of trying to somehow, because she wants to get healthier, it confuses me and it confuses my process, and somehow I'm just not getting to my child. I can't feel the pain of my childhood just because I feel so sorry for my mother for what I understand her too much for what she did, basically. Is that still very enmeshed?
Well, let me take a step back here with you. What are you missing? Let's say your mom's becoming aware, and as a result, she's changing, she's acknowledging, she's apologizing. And for you, you're realizing that it was enmeshed, and you're experiencing validation in its most purest, wonderful form, that your pain and your struggles and the responsibility that was put on you growing up was not healthy. Where are you stuck?
First of all, my mother is not up to apologizing. She keeps on saying, like, because of her difficult marriage, that's why she needed me. It's hard for me to put in a word.
No, you're doing a great job. What you're basically saying, which is true, there were very valid reasons and causes, and she did not necessarily intentionally want to harm you or hurt you, and she did what she did for reasons. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have to, you don't want her to apologize for her being a bad person, but you want to apologize and acknowledge the pain that was caused as a result. If she's busy just saying, do you know when I remember something, it was one of the most bizarre things. I think I was in social work school or something. They showed us this horrible video because they have to expose us to all the terrible things in the world. And I think it was a dad, there was a case of incest. And I'm not going to explain the details. And the dad was saying to the child, this was hard, the first time they met after coming out of incarceration, the person is like, this is what happened to me when I was a child. And this is what telling the child, it's just, this is what happened. And that's why I did what I did. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, how invalidating is that? Right? It's like I'm giving an excuse, which might be true, as opposed to it's just a fine difference of perhaps, this is what happened and led me to do this. At the same time, of course, ultimately, I didn't know better. I feel now responsible because I was the adult and I caused my child pain. And I'm sorry for the pain I caused. Although I didn't realize it, although it was a result from all the things, and I know I'm not a bad person and a bad mom and I love you or dad, at the same time, I caused you pain. And the bottom line is I am the parent and you were the child.
Right. Right. So it's not So it's not about my mother going through her healing. It's more that I still feel responsible to not feel pain towards my mother because ultimately she's a good person.
Yeah.
So
This
I
is-
have a hard time connecting to my
Correct. I see this all the time. Is people feel guilt for experiencing emotion or negativity towards their parents. They don't want to let it go because, first of all, we're taught kibbud av v'em, or I'm not supposed to be angry, or I'm not supposed to be upset, I'm not supposed to have these feelings. The bottom line, you have these feelings. And you should speak to a Rav about this, by the way. And the question should be is it okay if I feel resentment and anger towards my mother or towards my father? Is it okay that I talk about that and I process that and I address that and let that go in therapy, even if I say things I hated them and they were terrible parents? Can I do that? And the answer is, as I said before, that's going to help you connect more and let go of that anger and get closer. So you're not doing it for the purpose of hurting people, you're doing it for the purpose of healing. And that's the question you want to ask the Rav. Give yourself permission to feel and not feel guilty for feeling those emotions. Because the bottom line is you're feeling them already. It's not like you're making them, they're there.
it's just very deep. I can't connect to it. I can't reach it.
Well, the other thing is, I just tell you, just hearing you a little bit, I don't know if, again, I'm just saying perhaps you're getting preoccupied with a place that I need to be. And a lot of times when we expect ourselves and we need to be and we get even obsessed or think there's a way we should be in therapy, then we actually have difficulty getting to that place. So maybe you just have to be and let the process be. And also, if there is a part of you that's detaching or protecting, there are many therapies that help you identify those parts and modes and different things that are going on with you and learn to have dialogue with those and get distance and bring up emotion and experience emotion. There are lots of psychotherapies that could do that. And perhaps your therapist is working towards that with you. But having that expectation, well, I read in the Bina magazine that this person was able to connect to their emotions and then they felt all better. And it was all, there's no, that going through that is not going to, reading that or having that standard expectation is not going to let you connect to your emotion.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. It was very clarifying.
Sure.
Hey, Mattis, I know it's late, but there's a few more we must cover. We must cover. Sorry. I know this is way past your bedtime.
Way past.
Okay, it's a short question, but it's a very deep question. My husband and I have been dealing with issues related to parental enmeshment in our relationship. Number one is, how could I address this with him and maintain a healthy partnership while respecting our families? Like, he's involved with his parents so much that she's bothered by it. So she wants to have a conversation with him about it. How does she go about it? That's A. And B, how do they have, forget about them, it's a follow-up question. How do you actually have the conversation with your parent as an adult?
So let's go to the marriage. It might be, I don't know how, if the person even tried to say like, okay, I'm here. You don't have to speak to your mother. I just walked in the door, Why I'm supposed to, They totally don't get it. I think if that's the case, obviously you don't have to run to therapy. Sometimes going to a Rav or a chassan teacher, a college teacher, and realize and asking them together from an objectively, like what's healthy, what's normal, what are appropriate boundaries or expectations in a relationship, and having that heard from an objective third party can be taken, that both of them respect, can be more effective. Again, of course, you can first try to communicate it, but if this is how he understands, this is norm. What do you mean? Like, of course I have to do that for my parents. Of course I have to speak to them all the time. Of course I have to pick up the phone every time they call, even if you need me. So having that would be a suggestion of mine if that was happening, to come in front of a third party. What was the second half of the question?
How does a person, a couple, not a young couple, already a couple that's established, have a conversation with their parents, explaining them what's going on and where they want to have the relationship with them, they want to be close with them, but how to have it respectfully, how to have that conversation with your parents. And obviously we have to also respect that. I want to just make this, I think it's important to really say that parents try their best. No parent tries to do bad to their kid. No parent tries to make the kid dependent on them or mesh with them. It's coming from obviously generational issues that they're going through or personal things that they're leading on their kids. So it's not done with a evil intent. So if that's the question, how do you respectfully not destroy the relationship and not hurt the situation and have that conversation with them that they feel that you can maybe somehow, get the message through to them, you know what I mean?
So in dialectical behavioral therapy, there's a great set of interpersonal effectiveness skills that I recommend people use, especially in these type of conversations. And those skills are dear man, give fast. Some people might be familiar with them. And those are describe, express, assert, reinforce. And man is being mindful, appear confident, and reinforce. And give is being gentle, interested, validating in an easy manner. And the last is fast is your own self-respect, is being fair to yourself and others, no apologies, over apologies, stick to your values, and be truthful. Now, all those three areas that I said, dear, man, give, fast, three areas are focused in three areas of a relationship. One is to get your objective met. Two is no matter what it's how do I get my objective in this conversation? Two is how do I leave this conversation with the other person still feeling good about me? And three is how do I leave this conversation with feeling that I maintain my self-respect? And these skills can be really, really helpful to balance these three areas, because I think sometimes we're overly focused on objective and we're being very assertive and we're describing and, and we're forgetting the validation, like you said, Usher, of their perspective, and of being easy manner, and of showing interest in their perspective, and also about being fair and not, and also being truthful and respecting your own boundaries and values. So if you want to learn more about those skills, it's really describing in detail what the facts are, the situation, to make sure you're both on the same page. And then it's expressing your feelings and your opinions. And I think a lot of it, if you don't want the defensiveness, is express what I feel, what I'm experiencing, as opposed to what you're doing wrong or how you should be treating it, and letting go of that judgment. And then it's being assertive. So therefore, you know what I'm saying, Mom? Tell them what you need, explain your needs and reinforce them. If you do this for me, it will help us feel so much closer. I'll feel more respected. It will be better for our families. We can spend more time together. Reinforce them, respecting your boundaries and how to appear confident when you're doing that, using broken record, not getting entangled in the content, because that's what happens when people go back and forth. So there's a whole skill set there that can be extremely useful.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask this question for somebody they really don't want to ask live. They're in too much pain. I'm gonna read it, and there's a lot of details I'm missing, and I wish they would ask live, but they're in too much pain to ask live. They're saying there's a woman on this call who's estranged from her mother due to emotional abuse by her mother. She's asking how to get over the fear of feeling like it's an aveira, it's a sin, and to sometimes accept in some cases estrangement is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what we talked about earlier, is start with going to a Rav and a Posek and really discussing with them, and they will make it very clear to you that this is something that was necessary, that this was something that was what the Torah wants you to do. The all Chachma of Torah is everything's there, everything's included, and understanding what a person's needs are. When we ask shaylas, we know a simple example. We need to say Kriya Shema, right? If you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, you don't have kavanah. Midaraisa, you have to say it over. But if you have OCD and you say it over, you're doing an aveira. How could that be, right? Because we understand that there is illness and there is struggle and there are things that sometimes there are extreme cases. And I think going to a Rav and getting that support. And I think we said consistently on this call, there are those cases and there are those situations. I think what we're referring to on this call, that sometimes the questions that came in is that there's the other extreme where people are very quick to do what you are doing in this case. You might be of those cases that needed to do this. There's always those cases, right? There's someone who goes into residential treatment for an eating disorder, they're going to eat treif because that's what's needed for survival. So you have to go to those rabbanim and those poskim and those people who will, address that you're not doing an aver, you're doing a mitzvah. mitzvah. That is a mitzvah if that's how you're being guided. Now, Mattis Miller does not have shoulders to tell you that that's an Avera mitzvah. I'm not going to even pretend. But there are people who do, and that's their role.
Okay, Mattis, Maridik. Okay, let's go to the closing segment. It's a lot more we didn't cover, but we've covered, I think, a lot tonight. So I know it's 11:42 and we still have to do the closing, so let's get into it. Okay, first of all, Bishop Shkoyach for Mattis Miller for coming on tonight, giving tremendous chizuk, a real down-to-earth, concepts and advice, and the Olam really appreciates it. And Mattis, we gotta work on the next segment. Already have the next idea, so be careful.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I know so much work goes into this. Again, tonight's show is 156. I think Chachma Vabina was a good gematria for tonight because I think there was a lot of Chachma Bina that went into tonight's share. Again, if anybody wants to join the WhatsApp and get the flyers every week, WhatsApp me at 848-525-0066. Save my number, and I'll send you the flyer every Sunday night. If you also want to sign up for the weekly shares, the emails, Menachem is going to be emailing. If you sign up for menachemberenfeld.com, for his emails, he'll be sending you out all the information about Mattis Miller's program, which we'll talk about again in a second. Again, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the lineup, what's going on over here, because there's a lot happening. Next week, September 10th, is going to be the last share, because all the Yom Tovim are basically falling out on Sunday, so there will be no share for 4 weeks. So next week, September 10th, is going to be an amazing share with Reverend Zion Twersky from Milwaukee, big grand rabbi over there. He's going to be talking about, will this year's Rosh Hashanah hold a deeper meaning than dipping the apple in the honey, embracing renewal, exploring the significance of the sacred month. It's going to be a very powerful share. Please join us, be part of it, get the chizuk before you go into Yom Narayim, and really join and be part of it. Again, everything's recorded. It'll be on menachemberenfeld.com. If anyone has any questions, you can email coachmenachem@gmail.com. Tonight's share is 156. If you want to listen on the phone lines, Menachem should be up later tonight or tomorrow morning at 848-777-GROW. That's 848-777-4769. Thank you to all the advertising sponsors, the Lakewood Scoop, Ellie Ariel from 5 Central, Chaya Lekaufman from JCN. And I'm just going to repeat the information again that we said in the beginning. Mattis Miller, wrote a book, a famous book that's in 4 languages. He has a 12-hour skills course, strategy to improve yourself and your parenting. The course is for a parent at any age. It can help better parent learn skills to help you in the process. He charges normally $897 for this course. He said for the next week or two, I don't know, a week or two, she used this code. You have to put it in. The code is Coach, COACHM, Coach M, at the checkout, and it's going to drop the price 67% to $297. So we're $500 off the price. Menachem will email the links, masterparenting.don'tcontrolablechild.com, and take the course if you're a parent. You could learn tremendous valuable stuff. And again, like I said in the beginning, people took the course and they gained a lot. And it's a lot cheaper to take the course than to deal with all the problems afterwards. That much I can tell you. And please join us. I just wanted to mention again, so next week, September 10th, will be Rabbi Zion Twersky. There'll be no share till October 15th, which will be a week after Sukkot. And the lineup is strong and powerful. We have October 15th. Menachem, could I say? Ken Zugen?
Zug.
October 15th, we have scheduled famous lawyer Ben Brafman's coming on to talk about investing, Ehrlichkeit, Ponzi schemes, a lot of very important topics. Follow Reb Daniel Katz, who, I don't have to say anything more than Reb Daniel Katz. And we also have Reb David Lichtenstein also on the roster coming up. So there's a lot of big programs coming up. Please join us, be part of it, let people know about it. And I'm going to go to closing. I'm going to go to Menachem first. First, I'm going to give a little closing. I'm going to go to Menachem. And hold on 1 second. Okay. First of all, Mattis, thank you again for taking me up on this topic. I appreciate it. Me and Mattis have been in touch about this for quite a few months. Just putting it together. There was a lot of back work that went into it. I appreciate the effort and the time that Mattis gave to it and the dedication, as he always does. And it was very, very powerful. I feel like we covered a lot. Again, there's a lot more to cover, but the essential parts that you were trying to say were very, very powerful. And I think you brought it out very clearly between all the questions and everything that came out. And I really appreciate it. We're going to go to Coach Menachem for closing. And Mattis, after this 2+ hours of dealing with enmeshment, I want a real enmeshed closing, tying everything together and really leaving the oil with chizik and good takeaway. So Coach Menachem first.
Yes, like Rabasha said, amazing. Thank you so much. We've heard a lot tonight, and I think there was a lot of emotions going on, and it could be hard ones, and like we heard, it's important to be aware the things that come up, the triggers, and like we heard, it's real, and when we feel it, it's there. The only thing I would say, like I said many times, don't try to do it by yourself. There's a lot going on, whether it's the parent, the child, not sure what's right, what's wrong, feeling guilty, and all the other feelings. If you're going to try to do it by yourself, you're just going to continue in that cycle over and over, not very hard to get somewhere. But seeking help, getting guidance from whoever it is, one step at a time. We're not looking to get everything straight in one day. One step at a time, and hopefully we get to a better place. And that's the goal in Menachem. Nobody's looking to, anybody should have pain. And we all want to have relationships, healthy relationships, to understand. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but how to do it. If you do it by yourself, you might do it right, but go seek out help. And I do want to thank you, Mattis, for giving Coach Menachem listeners 67% off. Really, really appreciate it. And Menachem, for those who feel that they need it, they'll reach out and get the course. Don't wait till I'll get the emails afterwards. Menachem, can you still get the code from Mattis? Get it now. And thank you for that.
Okay, Mattis, let's go. Here we go.
So I'm wondering, after the fourth time, if we're enmeshed here.
We're very enmeshed.
The three of us. And I'm having difficulty leaving you tonight after 2 hours of talking about this. All the boundaries, times, all getting blurred together. But, I appreciate, to me, it's a true honor and privilege to speak to, a large audience and to the call on a topic that is, as I said, very sensitive and painful. And there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of perspectives. And I by no means sit here tonight saying that I get it all and I understand it all. Obviously, I've experienced a lot in my therapy room and I've learned a lot about many of these issues. And I hope I think the message that's important with all this pain is really understanding we can go from boundaries to balance. And that's I think that's something really important. Of course, there are those extreme cases, but I think it's important for us to think about that there is a balance. And my hope is also for all those who, like myself, doing the best possible to parent our children, can also really have learned tonight of what is some of the things that we can do to recognize, empower, develop the social development, the emotional development, the psychological development of our children, so that they can have that healthy attachment, so that they can go out into the world and not be dependent on others. They can feel secure and they can reach out to others and have that balance, that they can be the star in the sky and they can also be connected to all those on the ground, on the sand, and together accomplish all those goals and ultimately follow the values and the truths that we all believe. And that with this message, hopefully going into Rosh Hashanah, we should all be blessed with a year of just bracha and success and only nachas from all our children.
Amen.
Amen. Again, everybody have a great night. See you Menachem, same time, same place. The Zoom ID, September 10th. It's 9:30 Eastern Time with the Grand Rabbi of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Hunштeiper Rebbe, Rabbi Zion Twersky. And we're going to figure out, is there more to Rosh Hashanah than dipping the apple in the honey? And Hashem, let's get the chizik for Yom Tov. And please join us. And Mattis, as usual, we love you. You're the best. And another amazing, fantastic program. Thank you.
Thank you.